Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 3 of YPI Crew webinar week. And today I'm together with John and Laurence. John is the captain on Hannah, and Laurence is from YPI Crew. And I'm delighted to have this session today because it's a big one, and there's a lot of people that wanted to know more about this. And I see the chat. We've got people from Mallorca, from Manchester, from Austria, Barcelona, South Africa, France, Italy, from Scotland, from Costa Rica, from Tenerife, from all over the world. So it's like we are an international community, and that's, I think, one of the coolest things about yachting in general, that like we're from everywhere and we are united. Let me start with what we're doing today. And so because today is day 3 and we're gonna talk again about a very interesting topic, and we're doing that with Laurence. Laurence is the director of YPI Crew. I think a lot of you know her. I think everybody who's ever looked for a job has been to Laurence's office once or twice. And then we've got John with us, and John is the captain on Hannah. And I'm pretty sure that, John, you want to tell something more about yourself, how long you've been doing this?
I've been in yachting probably for around 20 years now. Originally started off in the Merchant Navy and then made the transition over into yachting. I suppose, it's been 20 years of an exciting journey. But as you mentioned, I did meet Laurence early in my career, and she was very helpful and very supportive. And it's great to see her still around, leading and giving good advice, a few years later. I've been captain on Hannah for the last 4 years. It's a rotational position which I share with another captain, and as I say, we're a busy charter boat which gets heavy private use as well. So we're currently in the shipyard, waiting to get some essential and non-essential works done. So I suppose we're kind of in the thick of it, in terms of how this pandemic or COVID-19 challenge is going to affect us all. So I suppose I'd maybe be the person on the ground for this webinar, and it's just to give my, I suppose, direct experience and maybe work with Laurence through the webinar to give a little bit of anecdotal and maybe sort of professional insight.
Yeah, well, much appreciated. Thank you so much for joining us today, John. And from us, it's myself and Joanna as every day. And Joanna is in the background but doing all the hard labor. And what are we doing today? Today we're talking about the future of Superyacht crew job market. And we're gonna, we have a lot of questions, and we might have some answers, we might not have answers, but Laurence has done surveys, research, all of it, and Laurence is about to share everything that she's experienced and everything that she knows and all the information she's gathered with this big group of people. This is the most popular webinar of the week so far. And so everybody, welcome again. Make sure you use the chat for any questions to make sure that we get a lot of engagement. I'll be reading the chat. I'll be popping in once in a while into the webinar room to make sure that the questions are answered. I'm here to help. Avni says, hi, John, looking forward to this. Mr. Dahl is there as well.
Say hello to Avnish.
Hi, Avnish. Good. I'm going to give it to you, Laurence. Please, it's your stage now. Enjoy, and everybody have a great session.
Thank you very much, and thank you, YPI Crew, and of course, thanks, John, for being here today. Big topic indeed. Will there be a season? But before I get into the topic, I just wanted to say that this morning I had a very brief chat with my heads of departments at YPI Crew, and I have a message to the crew, and the message is that all the recruiters very much enjoy all the chat and the conversation that they've had with you, with everybody out there. And the positive thing is that for once we actually have a time to really chat, and it's not just a very quick conversation about a job, an interview, but it's a bit about having time and really reconnect with each other. And so, yes, the recruiters are really enjoying this part of the lockdown, which is obviously not the greatest time for anybody. But the topic, yes, will there be a season? And that's probably the question that the whole yachting industry is asking. And you, all the crew, we all wanting to know. And I must say that probably for the first two weeks of the lockdown, this question was going around in my mind and I was almost going crazy. But realistically, because we had started the month of March with social distancing already in the office, but on the 17th of March, when the French lockdown happened, it was, and I tell you, it was brutal. Like it was almost an overnight drop in recruitment activity, as really the whole world was gripped with isolation, lockdowns, and travel bans. So, and as you know, most of you know, for recruiters and for the industry, March, April, and May are the 3 months where everything happens. This is where we place you on yachts the most, our busiest time. And I will be candid with you, and I'd like to perhaps share some numbers. April 2020, if I compare April 2020 with April 2019, the activity has dropped by 80%. So that's 80% across the board. We're talking number of jobs, number of placement, and of course, turnover. We a company. So, you know, of course, a lot of worries, but very quickly in the process, I realized that when you talk about such a big pandemic, there's very little influence you can have on the situation. You, of course, can act at your micro environment, but at the macro environment, you have no influence. So let's leave the worry aside. And then the next stage for me was, of course, to plan and to prepare the company for what is coming up next. Perhaps for the crew out there who worry about, will there be a season? Will I have a job? Of course, all these sorts can be quite energy draining. So the best things that what can do at the moment is really stay informed of what is going on, and things are changing daily, sometimes hourly. And really to try to leave all that angst behind by engaging in some positive activities. But I will later on share some positive news and how we feel that the market might evolve or is evolving already. But perhaps before we look at the future, where are we at now? Today's the end of April. Where are we at now? So, as I've mentioned, there's 2 simultaneous events which took place with the lockdown. Initially, it was almost a freeze in recruitment, but the recruiters also experienced and really witnessed the evidence of, I will call it a knee-jerk reaction. Probably fueled by uncertainties, and the recruiters heard about a lot of crew who were asked to take salary reductions, lost their jobs, rotation got cancelled. So quite a lot of bad news. And then I said, okay, well, what is a real reflection? What is really happening on the market? Because as you can imagine, people or candidates tend to contact us when, you know, perhaps things go badly, when they've lost their job or they've had a salary cut. Very few people were calling us to say, hey guys, I'm doing extremely well, I got a pay rise. So we didn't have this kind of positive conversation. So I decided as a company that we needed to take attitude on the topic. And this is why, we've done this a quick survey with our clients. So we engaged captains who have contacted YPI Crew over the last year for recruitment jobs. So we sent them a very brief survey, and I would like to perhaps share the results of this survey. Or no, Joanna, if you could perhaps. So
it's coming up on the screen there now, Laurence, the Captain C19 survey.
Okay, but in fact, before we discuss all that, John, what was yeah. What is your situation on board, Hannah? You're in a shipyard.
Yeah, that's right. No, I just wanted to pick up on one thing that you mentioned there in your introduction, Laurence, where you said that you know, it was difficult for crew or for members of the industry to participate on a macro level. And I think possibly the only way to participate on a macro level is to be sort of a subscribed member of your bodies or organizations, be it the PYA or Nautilus International, because they're your representative bodies who are your voice on the sort of on the worldwide stage. For example, one of the things that Nautilus Institute are trying to bring about is a travel certificate for seafarers. It's probably more directly related to those in the sort of the goods supply and essential services, but and I suppose commercial yachts would technically fall under that category. And you know, who knows, you know, maybe super yachts could potentially be repurposed for, you know, for some other work within, you know, sort of managing whatever the challenges of COVID-19. That's maybe something in the future, or something, you know, that could come about. We don't know, but I certainly think you know, people should be encouraged to think at a macro level as well, because, you know, we are a body, we are a huge group of people who have a sort of a vital role to play in the economy and in the communities and in the places where these boats are serviced, maintained, operate. So I think people should you know, should think in wider terms as well, because it's a healthy thing to be engaged in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But so yeah,
no, it's a very good point. Very good point indeed.
Yeah, and I suppose, yeah, just to get back to your original question there about just our situation at the moment. We're docked here in La Ciotat. We're waiting to go into the shipyard to carry out some essential and non-essential works, just the general kind of seasonal maintenance of the boat, and getting our annual surveys completed as well. We don't have a full crew on board at the moment, but we're not, you know, we normally operate with 9. We're down to 7. But going into the shipyard now, the shipyard are planning to open up on the 11th. We're due to be hauled out on the 12th. So they're making strides in terms of, you know, trying to fulfill the maintenance programs that yachts have. But I do think it will be, you know, what would normally be a 4-week program may run to 6 or 7 weeks, just because of, you know, lining up contractors, making sure the supply chains are working, all of these kind of challenges that we're being faced with. But they're certainly trying to kind of gear back up for some sort of activity. And I think we have to be very sort of conscious of the fact that, you know, in terms of dealing with the I suppose the pandemic, we're in the suppression stage at the moment. We're in lockdown, so we're not going to catapult from suppression into, you know, sort of whatever open season. So I think there'll be a kind of, as everybody's well aware of from reading the sort of the papers and following the news and stuff like that, anything that does happen will be staggered. and we'll go back into the kind of mitigation phase. And I think the whole thing about the big question, whether or not there'll be a season and whether or not yachts will operate, it will just whether they can operate within, you know, the regulations of a mitigated sort of, I suppose, kind of society or economy. And I think they're the questions that, and the answers have to be found for. Is can a super yacht operate in in a mitigation sort of scenario?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, let's see if we can find some answers in that survey.
Yeah, sure.
So, okay, so it's actually quite small here for my eyes.
Oh yeah, I've got my glasses on. Let me tell if I know if I can help.
So, no, do you want to perhaps read the questions?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Question 1 is, have you or your crew been asked to agree with the modified terms on your SEA? 28% say yes to that, and 72% say no. So, and I think it was quite well polled. So maybe it's a good reflection. I think you did note, Laurence, the number of people that participated in this survey, just so people have an idea of how sort of how captive it is.
How many people participated? A third.
Okay. No, just how many people did you poll for the?
Sorry.
Survey? Yeah.
Yes, it was just 346.
Okay, yeah. So it's quite captive then. Yeah, you've got a large.
Yes, captains. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I think we can move on to the next question.
Yeah, let's go to the next question. So if you don't mind reading it.
Yeah, next question is, have you or your crew had to accept the following changes in your employment?
Yeah.
So some of the changes were reduced or removed rotation. I think they had 13%. That was a factor. Paid leave agreed, 18%. Unpaid leave agreed, 14%. Salary reduction, 20%. And then employment terminated, 16%. So yeah, everybody is experiencing, I suppose, some element of changes to their employment agreements, seafarer employment agreements.
Yeah,
it's definitely yeah, I suppose it's, and a lot. I think you did mention that some of these, they're kind of have been like knee-jerk reactions which happened early on, and I think there will be owners and management companies that will take a sort of a slightly longer term view, whereas maybe they'll see what unfolds over the next sort of 3 to 6 months, rather than reacting to I suppose what's happened in February and March. So hopefully as I say, these changes won't become systemic and we see a spiral downwards.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so the recruiters heard a lot of comments about people having to take a salary cut. So if you go to the next slide, we've asked, what sort of salary reduction are you actually experiencing? And so we see that the biggest chunk is in the sort of 26 to 50%.
Yeah.
So which is quite substantial. It's in fact enormous.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And it's probably the thing that a lot of people are very worried about. Certainly back when I was working back in 2006, 2007, 2008, during this sort of was the financial downturn. I remember at the time there was a request made by the owner, in order to keep things operational, that the crew would right across the board would take a 20% pay cut. So it's not an unusual reaction, to these downturns. But I suppose what's different to that was that there was still people were still able to use their yachts and there was still a charter market.
Yeah.
But it was just, as
I mean, what was perhaps surprising here is that how quickly this happened.
Yeah.
People made some really quick decision.
Yeah.
Which, perhaps is surprising, but perhaps we can move on to the next slide.
Yeah, the next question, the question number 4 is crew requirements. If applicable, when will you need to resume recruitment for your yacht? So, yeah, just looking forward for the next 6 to 12 months. And I think do you want me to read these out, the results?
Well, I sort of can see a bit. I mean, what I thought was actually a positive response is that there was quite a lot of good confidence for the month of June.
Yeah.
Which is great. But also the very last comment, the very last, which is where people didn't give an answer. So that means that people are just really waiting to see. And so I take that last section as a very positive, as a very positive element, that people are hopeful, and that's what we want.
Yeah, it was definitely, I suppose, definitely cause for optimism. Certainly, if the shipyards are getting back into action, and as I say, that kind of would indicate that boats have to be maintained and fixed and kept in good working order. So
I'm just looking for some figures here, which I pulled out this morning again from our own database. We have at the moment, and of course the recruiters, their brief during the lockdown was to keep in contact with our clients. We have at the moment 246 jobs which are on hold. So those were jobs which were very much alive and kicking in March. And then they got put on hold. But however, on hold means they will come alive again.
Yeah.
So the question is, of course, when. But I thought I wanted to share this because it's a good number, and it's across all the departments. And once I said that the activity had dropped by 80%. However, I must say that each department has made a limited number of placements during the last months, but each department has, carried on working. And of course, over the last week, and I expect certainly as we drift towards the end of the lockdown in France, which is on the 11th of May, things will pick up. So I'm very confident. But I was very pleased to see the result of this survey here.
Yeah.
So, it's done. And then the next ones are, more sort of straightforward questions as to, how people see the after lockdown and what measures they plan on implementing. So no surprise in these results.
No surprise, yeah. I think, the actual, I suppose, kind of the regulations or the sort of processes that you have in place will probably be very much determined by, the sort of the regulatory bodies and by management companies and by, I suppose, the charter agreements. So a lot of what will be expected will be kind of driven by that. And then I suppose what boats implement sort of personally themselves. And I suppose you don't want to, it's a hospitality industry at the same time. So you don't want to impinge too much on people's, I suppose, comfort or relaxation either. So there'll have to be a balance struck there, won't there, in terms of how tough these whatever special protective measures are and how realistic they are. But so it'll definitely it'll be food for thought, and like a lot of sort of planning and consideration would have to go into those special protective measures to operate the boat on a charter.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that probably sums up this survey. There's perhaps another question.
I'll read this one out. If yes to question 5, and again, what type of measures? So the ones that are that we're all popularly experiencing at the moment anyway. The masks, that's very much under discussion. Protective clothing, COVID-19 pre-hire tests, or tests pre-hire, pre-boarding, and quarantine for joining crew. I suppose quarantining is something that which sort of has to be implemented if you have, I suppose, crew members traveling from what may be considered hot zones, and if the crew member is arriving in France or arriving in Italy, depending on what country they're arriving from, assuming that they're able to travel and get into the country, the country will have those restrictions or guidelines anyway. So you just be operating within whatever was the recommended for that country. So, but
yeah, for sure. I mean, and here we are at the heart of the question, the heart of our topic. Will there be a season? And of course, the main two criteria are going to be the lift of these travel bans and the testing and identifying the risks on board. So, and I think, we finished with the survey. We can probably remove this. So of course, travel remains compromised as of now. As I said, France is coming out of lockdown on the 11th. As of now, there's nothing that tells us that sea travel and port will reopen after the 11th of May. We're waiting for information. One can assume that the various French ports will follow suit with the navigation
side of it,
rulings. So they should go hand in hand. Even so, I know that as of now, and as of, in fact, I'm looking at my calendar, as of the 24th of April, if you're in a French shipyard, you are allowed to go out to do sea trial, isn't it, John?
Yeah, that's right.
So, the situation will evolve, hopefully quickly. Hello, Ono.
Hey, I'm just popping in because I see a very interesting question. I see a lot of questions, and thank you, YPI Crew, for the people that are in the chat for answering a lot of those questions already. But there's a question from Jamie. It says, what are my options if I'm asked for a reduction? Do I agree or terminate it? Is it negotiable? How does it work? What are your rights?
What we encourage all parties to do as candidates, captain, management company. The operational word here is negotiation. Negotiations. What happens if you do not agree with your with the proposed salary reduction, is that perhaps the next step is your contract will be, your SCA will be terminated, perhaps. Of course, according to the rules written in your SCA, you're not going to be, fired on the spot with no salary, etc. So, the rules will prevail, but there is a risk that, your contract will be terminated. So it's about, negotiating. That's probably the best advice.
Because as Agnes is saying, the force majeure clause is used a lot, which means that negotiating is harder, correct?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we all a human chain. Somewhere in this chain, there's a human being who makes a decision. Mm-hmm. So it's also that relationship you have with the ultimate decision maker. Perhaps, going back to that knee-jerk situation, we also sometimes act irrationally. But sometimes if you can, do not underestimate sometimes the power of being able to influence someone, even an owner. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, I'm not saying it's always possible, and I know for a fact that in many cases it's not. But sometimes it is. It's a question of being, able to put your case forward, and sometimes negotiation can lead to a satisfactory result. Mm-hmm. What's your view, John, on that? It's
I do think that I don't think there's one specific answer to it. I think it's very much on a case by case basis, isn't it? In the sense that if you've been asked to take a salary reduction, is that something promulgated obviously by the owner or by the managing company, and there may be it may be in the sense that if this salary reduction is taken, we can operate for the next 12 months, whereas if it's not taken, we've got 6 months of operation, given the conditions at the moment. So I think Laurence is correct, is that it's very much your ability to negotiate. It's very much a case by case basis. If you're only recently in the industry, or maybe you're somebody who's been working on board the same yacht for the last 10 years, everybody's bargaining power will be different. And also, I suppose, based around the expectation of the owners of the management company, whether they are privately operated or they, heavily rely on charters, to keep going.
Sorry, when I said negotiating, sorry, but I probably also meant the burden of that negotiation really lies on the captain's shoulders.
Yeah.
It's obviously, if you're a crew, you're not going to negotiate with your owner. It's your captain who will negotiate.
Obviously, you have a massive interest in protecting people's jobs, because the yachts are very valuable assets, and if they're not maintained and looked after, they deteriorate very quickly. So what may seem like a short-term fix, in the sense of, okay, well, I'll knock off whatever, half the crew, the yacht starts to deteriorate, it's not maintained, systems seize up, whatever paintwork collapses. So you could be faced to bring that yacht back to, sort of operational condition, maybe after a 12-month layoff or an 18-month layoff or however long. If you don't look at it, in the long term, you could be potentially facing a much bigger bill in 18 months' time to get your yacht back up and running. So I do think, while there is this, I suppose, kind of layup period, there is a duty for I suppose for captains, certainly, to look after the yacht as best they can, and improve it and enhance it. I say certainly, the crew on board here have been working extremely hard in maintaining the yacht and overhauling the systems. It's actually it's almost in concourse condition at the moment. So, but we have to keep that.
There's also perhaps another point about this salary reduction, is that companies around the world, everybody's always looking after a company's image. What kind of image do we have? And that very much applies to a yacht as well. What kind of image does this yacht have, or what kind of reputation does this yacht have? And I think that how a crew will have been looked after during this pandemic is also going to be an interesting point for after the pandemic. What kind of image will this yacht have? And I think that's something that owners are also should, if they're not, think about. We don't want to have a stigma of having been that yacht where everything went wrong, or everybody had to take massive pay cuts. There's also something to think about. Of course, I cannot talk about individual cases, but as a whole, something that's is also there.
Can I pop in one more question from the chat, and then I'll leave you again, because I don't want to take over your webinar. It's like Ernesto's saying about social distancing. Obviously, that's going to be a yacht is hospitality business. Would it apply? And Laurence, John, what do you think is going to happen on the boats? And also thinking about sharing bunks and all those things.
Oh, I'll let John answer that one.
Well, I suppose we're in the lockdown phase at the moment, so we're very much like, I suppose, like a house or a home, in that we're self-isolating to more or less the same way a household would be, as we're directed. So I suppose we look on each other at the moment, and as I say, we have 9 crew, but yachts have 15, 20, 30 crew. So and all of a sudden the problem comes when you need to start doing crew changes, and with a new crew member coming in. And I suppose ultimately then, in the lockdown phase here, they present a threat, unless they've been quarantined, or they walk out of the doctor's office with their test certificate saying negative and straight onto the boat. So in terms of, I suppose, if you get into a situation where you're asking, I suppose, crew to social distance, well, I think the kind of the yacht becomes inviable, you know. So the crew have to be able to work together. They work very closely together, mooring the boat on service, servicing the equipment. So it's not you can't have social distancing on a yacht. I think you have to try and just make sure that the yacht is healthy, and that everybody can work together. And I think they'll have to be, if they do decide to sort of open up the economy to a greater or lesser degree, and you know, they'll have to, I suppose, look at people getting infected, and you know, in these kind of work environments, and how they manage that without shutting everything down, and without, you know, putting everybody into quarantine. And that's like, that is a challenge, and I don't have the answer to that. Maybe
yes. Yes, and that leads us very well into that other sort of main avenue of, is there going to be a season, is what about the testing and identifying risks, and that's such a hot topic at the moment, because everything could be made so easy for everybody if these tests were all ready to go, available and reliable. And that's the thing at the moment. There's, as we all know, there's these two kind of tests: the antibodies detection and I have to look at my notes here. The
PCR, is it?
The PCR testing, yes. Both serve different purposes, but of course, scientists themselves disagree greatly on the reliability of the PCR testing. I've seen some reports coming from both sides of the world, whereby, you know, some of them are unreliable, ranging from 3% to 30%.
Yeah.
And of course, the antibody detection test don't tell you if you're ill right now, right this minute. You may be contagious and you know, have a negative test. So, as you mentioned earlier on, John, for right now, this minute, the answer is probably quarantine and self-isolation. But that doesn't mean that this will be the answer in 2 weeks. Of course, since 2018, YPI Crew is part of the Schulte Group, a huge shipping company, and they employ 16,000 seafarers. So, as you can imagine, they have a vested interest in finding a right solution. But they're also still at the process of deciding what is going to be the solution. They, of course, don't want to act rashly. And
I think you did. You mentioned something there when we were discussing this earlier last week. For example, you mentioned that Bosch were bringing out COVID test machine that could deliver a result within 2.5 hours or something.
So we have looked into it further, and it's probably not going to be the answer to yachting.
No, I'm not suggesting it as an answer to yachting, certainly. But what I'm saying is that it indicates that testing can happen, and you can get a result quite quickly. So you often, you know, the possibility, like if you were trying to think of a kind of creative solution, and somebody, you know, really wanted to have a charter holiday on a yacht, and you know, the yacht had been declared healthy. None of the crew were sort of were suffering from COVID-19. So I suppose theoretically, you know, you could go to a villa for a week. You could have your COVID test done, and then you could be transferred directly to the yacht and enjoy a week's holidays, as opposed to, so you could have a sort of a villa, a week in the villa, a week on the yacht, and it would be a sort of like a combination package, you know. So
absolutely, that's a great idea, John.
that would be,
that's
I
a great
suppose,
idea.
yeah. So that I suppose going through the process of being tested was just sort of a stepping stone on the way to your holiday or to your destination.
Yeah.
And maybe, as I say, the charters that are on offer, which something else that we discussed was, you know, that the itineraries would be scaled back. You know, that it would be more about anchorages, enjoying the water sports, enjoying maybe the spa treatments on board, the quality of the service that the crew can offer. So it would
Pressure on the chefs.
Well, absolutely. I was just going to get to the chef. You know, if you had a Michelin-star chef, he could, as I say, win the day or win the week or however long the charter may be. But certainly they would be the things that you would be focusing on in terms of offering a charter, and not event charters or parties, or you would very much have to kind of tailor you know, the holiday or the charter so that it was in keeping and, you know, had good optics for what the wider community and the wider world is experiencing, because, you know, ultimately, you know, the boats operating on charter keep the economy going and keep people working and keep jobs viable. So I think they have to look at creative. They have to look at creative solutions and not a kind of
absolutely
not blanket bans or you know, at a one size fits all, because it's not the direction to go. So I think that's
and certainly the pace will probably, you know, the pace between charters will probably be much
longer.
Yeah. And certainly, even if the restaurants open, I mean, we have no indication for the French restaurants as of yet. There will be an announcement at the end of the month with regards to restaurant in France. So, but obviously they will open at one stage or the other. But I expect that even so they open again in June or July, I foresee that owners and charter guests will much prefer to stay on board the yachts and engage with the chef on board.
Absolutely.
I think that's more than ever, you know, going back to this salary situation. Also, you know, the chef will be under pressure to perform at a high level, probably a bit more than they used to before.
Absolutely.
Because there's not going to be the restaurant experience amidst everything else.
Yeah, it's very true. And also, you know, getting the quality produce on board to deliver that experience as well is so there's a big, I suppose, you know, that the provisioners and the suppliers can remain viable as well. So everything is, as you say, it's a chain, isn't it? And you want to kind of keep the chain linked up and keep all the
absolutely
parts of it functioning. But I do think that it will, if we do, and I hope we do have a season, that it may be something a little bit different and probably scaled back and a little bit more exclusive. That's the way it should happen, you know.
Hello, Ono.
Hello, Laurence. I think we'll be talking a lot about like crew at the moment and about the season. I know there's a lot of green crew as well that have like logged into this webinar, and Dylan is asking the question as well. What about the green crew? Should they look at this season, or is it 2021?
Okay, good question. There's probably two elements to answer this question. First of all, we really need to see what's happening with this travel ban. Because until this is fixed, there's not going to be realistically any jobs for green crew. They won't be able to dock walk and anyway. So it is going to be more of a challenge for green crew in 2020 for sure. I would say give yourself a few weeks and see how things pan out. I expect that by mid-May, after the end of the French lockdown, we'll be in a better position to assess what kind of jobs are coming in. and then we can judge. But at the moment, I would say don't make any, of course, travel arrangements. I don't know where this person is based. I know there are flights, some flights from the UK, but certainly don't travel at the moment. And see, I think we'll be in a better position in a few weeks to answer this question.
Thank you for that answer. There's another one that's saying, like, obviously once you're on board with guests or with the owner, then and everybody is well, but how are you going to do that with provisioning and other things that has to go on board? John, how do you see that procedure going?
Well, I think again, it's the pre-planning, isn't it, that we'll have to go into. So again, it'll be back, but the things will just be a bit stricter. So if you have your advanced provisioning lists from the charter guests, so you know what they require on board, what they would like to have on board during that charter, all of that can be, I suppose, pre-ordered. When we're having, for example, for provisions delivered now during the lockdown, we wipe everything off with alcohol and we leave it to stand on the deck for 24 hours before we, sort of store it and use it. So I think you'd have to have a similar whatever processes in place to kind of just to protect the boat and to protect the guests and protect the crew. So a lot of it would, again, it gets back to the pre-planning, and there'd be an awful lot more pre-planning to execute a charter, and there won't be the same, I suppose, kind of flexibility during the charter, where maybe if the guests decide that they want something in particular, that you won't be able to respond to that immediately the way you have been able to do in the past, because we all know, as I suppose, as captains and crew sort of operating during charter, a lot of it is about sort of satisfying very quickly, these sort of just demands that come up during the charter, a request for a particular type of wine, or a request for a particular type of fish, or a particular service. They need a beautician on board, or a hairdresser, or a masseuse, and things like that. So a lot of that would have to be, I suppose, you'd have to decide very, very clearly before the charter, what services you wanted on board, and that they could all be in place before the guests arrived, and that there wouldn't be as much flexibility during the charter to respond to requests by the guests, because it just logistically it might not be possible, and again it may threaten the health of the vessel in terms of the keeping the virus out.
Yeah, well, we will require a strong captain, because we all know how owners and guests can be very demanding.
Yeah, but I think we should be empowered by this as well, like in the sense that we can see now, like, people have a lot of common sense, in the sense that they respond to what's sort of what appeals to their intellect, and there is a threat there and they don't want to be exposed to that threat. So if you're putting regulations in place, or putting kind of rules in place, they're for a good reason, but again, it's a holiday. You don't want it to be going on a military camp for a week either, so.
I see there's a question from James Burkholz with regards to new qualified officers. Perhaps if any of my teams on the deck side are listening, perhaps they could answer to James on the messages.
Great. I think the YPI Crew that you are, they're doing great in the chat.
Questions about officers, so I leave my team to answer those.
Yeah, good. Keep pumping in the questions. I think it's great to keep all these. The engagement is fantastic in the chat. Laurence, is there anything else you would like to share during this webinar? I mean, you've already shared a lot of information.
Well, I mean, another, perhaps just with regards to recruitment, one of the main change I think that will probably happen is in the relationship that we might have with our candidates, is video interviews through the various platforms available are going to be more prevalent. Of course, we used to do that a lot before, because it's not uncommon for us to sit in Antibes, have a client in Germany, a candidate in South Africa, or Australia. So these video interviews were taking place already, but I think that now it will be more prevalent, and people are just more comfortable with using this mode of communication for interviews. Did we have a little poll to run or no?
Oh, we've lost Otto's voice. We've lost Otto's voice.
Oh, sorry, that was me. I had to sneeze and then I forgot to put my volume on again. We have a poll. Let's okay. I'm going to put a poll in here. Has COVID-19 affected your SCA, your CFAS employment agreement? I'm going to launch it now. So let's see how you, the people on the chat, are responding to this one. Let's see if we can get some reactions in. It will take a bit for people to respond. You got a few answer options. Not at all. You've been asked to take a pay cut. You've been given notice. Remain employed. So far, oh, here we go. Here we see the results coming in. I'll give you a bit, give them a bit more time. So like the first response is like over 50%. Of half of people say like business as usual, and then a quarter has been asked to take a pay cut, and a quarter have lost their job. So that's very unfortunate. Obviously, it's lowering a bit to 44% business as usual. Paid leave is coming up now 20%. So it's moving. There's a lot of, as you can see, there's a lot of varieties, as you guys have discussed previously during the webinar as well. There's a lot of options, a lot of different ways. But so far, if I would call this the end of the poll, 40% business as usual, and 60% of the people are affected. And I think that matches with your results of your survey, correct, Laurence?
Yeah, very happy. We're very happy to see that. It's great news. Very great news.
Good. I'm going to end this poll, and I'm going to ask, and I'm going to do one more poll, and that's like the question is, and I'm going to change the question. So the question is, do you feel confident June will begin with the Met season? Read July, please. I want to see let's read July because June is very soon. Let's see what people say on this one. July. So don't say June. It's July. Do you feel confident that the?
So what's going on? Yeah.
Oh, we have to wait. So the first one say no. Okay, here we go. This is.
Oh, geez, I was a bit worried there.
This is the battle. It's like it's going up and down. We're at 50-50.
Okay, how optimistic, how negative are we? Ali, what's going on?
It's 50-50. It's like it's 50-50.
It's tight. It's tight.
Yeah, let's
come on, July. Come on, July.
Oh well, no one's winning. Yes is winning. It's like it's a struggle. I think on this note, I think this is a great moment. I think it's undivided. It's 50-50. Yes has won by 53%. By the way, if 54%, I'm ending the poll now because I like the results. Like the positive result. I think this is a great way to have as a final message. Galina, the Northern Europe, the Scandinavian countries, they're less touched. Maybe yes, the charters will move down there. I see in the chat from Helen and some other people, YPI Crew, that there are a lot of charter requests, there are less cancellations, but people are just like looking at not final decisions. But I guess also John and Laurence, the charter agreements are very flexible, right, at the moment?
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. I did a bit of research on this, and I found that many yachts are offering addendums. And I'm just going to read you, a typical one. Free cancellation is available for charters booked before June 1st, 2020. Charter tips can be cancelled penalty-free up to 30 days before the start of the charter. So there's a lot of that going on out there. So people are really being encouraged to not, stop their booking, but to go ahead and have the confidence that if things go wrong, you can get out of it. Yeah. So the charter market is of course adapting.
Yeah, and obviously, without talking very much about Europe, unfortunate, and like Marika said, like South Africa is not in the beginning of their peak. They still have to reach their peak. I think Europe and the US and the Caribbean are have reached maybe hopefully their top and like are trying to recover again. So let's see how things go. I would love to thank you, John, Laurence. I think it was a great session. So everybody, just pop a quick like reaction in the chat to see how you have. Did you enjoy this? Was this useful for you? Should we do this more often? Let's get some reactions in the chat to finalize. I know you've like it always takes a few seconds because they're a bit behind us.
Yeah. I
Let's
suppose,
see.
I just before we sign out there as well, Ono, I think there's a very it's just a slightly off topic and not directly related to the yachting, but there's the publishers Penguin, they're the whatever famous book publishers, and they have a thing running at the moment called Perspectives, where they ask a lot of their sort of authors and people who write for their publishing house just to do a 500-word piece on the sort of the wider sort of perspective, and a lot of them are very thoughtful pieces, you know. But one of the ones that came up, there's a writer, Olga Edith, you know, and she was saying that it's very important for people, you know, not to look at it as a sort of a crisis, but as a period of transition, and it's just how you manage that period of transition, and it kind of you need sometimes these kind of perspectives to help you kind of deal with what we're going through, and to sort of, I suppose, to maybe to plan and to look for the future, because a lot of people, what we're experiencing now, there's a very positive side to it in the sense that, you know, that I suppose the hammering that the environment is taking, you know, the environment's getting a little bit of a break at the moment, and a lot of like cities like Milan, for example, are suggesting, you know, being traffic free by 2022 because they've just seen the peace that has been brought to the, you know, to these city centers, and maybe that's something that will kind of filter down through to you know, to very busy tourist hotspots, that it'll be less about sort of packing people in, and it'll be more about giving people a quality experience, you know. And I think I suppose a healthier, more environmentally friendly experience. So I do think we have to, I suppose, learn from this as well in terms about when we do start to move forward, you know, how we move forward. I know we may not be involved in that directly, but it is food for thought, I suppose.
It definitely is food for thought. And I'm going to also start with a bit of I want to end with a bit of a positive note. I'm sharing a little in the chat. Crew awards. We still have a week to nominate the best crew in the industry. So do it. I think the awards will happen, whether it's 10th of October that is planned or a bit later, depending on how this whole COVID-19 go. We are doing it. It's a great thing. I think it's something we need to reward everybody that has been so good for the industry, even if they're not working at the moment. This is not only about today. It's also about 2019, beginning of 2020. So with a positive note, thank you so much, John. Thank you so much, Laurence. I think this was a great session. I'm very sure we'll do it again. And everybody, bye-bye. And see you this afternoon. See you tomorrow. See you for the rest.
Okay, bye-bye, everybody. Thanks, Arno. Thanks, John.
Bye-bye.